Hello and welcome to today's video. So today I'm taking on York City in League 2. So today's topic will be the future of democracy. I'll be discussing obviously the short-term future of democracy and the concerns that exist at the moment, and then also about the long term. So York City we're taking on today, as you can see, well you're about to see where we are in the league. Here we are. So we're second in the league, 3 points off the top, York City down in 10th. So let's hope we can get a win today. So today's topic is the future of democracy. Obviously, future of democracy, we think a lot about the short term. Of course, if you read up online, you'll find out about the recession of democracy that has seemed to have been occurring since around the dawn of the 21st century. There are more extreme examples, obviously, with Turkey and Erdogan, who I often pronounce as Erdogan for quite some time, but I think it's Erdogan. At least that's what I've heard anyway. And then obviously you have accusations of anti-democratic behaviour by both sides, toward both sides, in regards to Brexit. Um, and then you have Trump in the US and the impeachment inquiry that's going on at the moment. So there's a lot of concerns regarding democracy in the world today, and there's a lot of real evidence that democracy is under threat. Um, I was researching, even for example, about the situation in Bolivia, which there is a lot of evidence that it does seem to be a coup. If you do a bit of research into it, it's quite interesting. I was watching a Secular Talk segment of it, a few segments actually that he did on it, and what I found was, as well, by doing a bit of my own research as well, not just trusting the words of any given political commentator, of course, either, but he is quite a very reliable source from the seams of it. Um, and it did seem to be evidence of anti-democratic behaviour, and you can see that obviously with the US pushing for potentially for war with Iran, and obviously we saw it with the situation with Iraq, but there is a lot of concerns regarding anti-democratic behaviour and tendencies throughout the world at the moment, and it's where it's like heading, and I think in terms of concerns regarding democracy, concerns regarding the current political climate and polarization, I think we're probably going to see a peak of this sometime in the middle of the next decade. And there's a lot of trends and studies that are suggesting, and models, both economic and otherwise, that are suggesting that we will see some sort of a peak of crisis around the middle of the next decade, the mid 2020s. Economic trends suggest that there's a lot of bubbles at the moment that are ready to burst, and it mightn't necessarily be that all the bubbles will burst in the mid 2020s. It might, more than likely we'll see a recession before then. But in terms of when the crisis that results from it will peak, could be around the middle of the 2020s. There's a real go on. Yes, great start. 1-0. Phillips with that goal. There we go. 1-0 up. But there is a lot of reasonable sort of evidence that, or there's a reasonable chance, should I say, that perhaps there could even be another Great Depression. That's a big concern. The Great Recession in the late 2000s. It was dealt with, but it wasn't. It was dealt with much better than the crisis that led to the Great Depression was. I mean, that was the difference really that prevented there being a depression in the late 2000s, was that they bailed the banks out. But of course, that's not a very popular nor morally correct situation to be in. Of course, they should have avoided a situation where bailing out the banks was, necessary for the global economy to avoid falling into a global depression. And they shouldn't have, setting aside whether it was the right call to make in that moment when the recession had began, when the financial crisis began, it shouldn't have been allowed to get to that in the first place. And that's of course why the likes of Bernie Sanders talk about breaking up the big banks in the US, for example. But kind of get more back to the point, there's a lot of evidence that there will be obviously a recession coming up perhaps in the next year or two, and then we might see the economic crises that result from that culminating in some sort of a peak of chaos and crisis around the middle of the 2020s. And there's also, I was watching a Vsauce video not too long ago. I'll try to remember what it was called, and I'll link it in the description box below if I can find it. Basically, where he was discussing this 250-year cycle that it's called, where basically there's evidence of a sort of cyclistic nature to American history, and of course America, obviously they say if America sneezes, the world catches a cough or a cold or whatever it is. Um, so it's not just relevant to the US, and of course this cycle could appeal in variations to all other countries, not just because of the implications of the US's. Oh, that was so close. The US situation being so impacting on the global situation that if the US is in a crisis, it's probably going to lead to a global crisis, or at least tending in that direction. Oh, that was a good chance, but straight at the keeper. We're playing well in this game, I have to say. Um, we always seem to do well against York City, I find. Oh, here's a chance. I haven't even played FIFA in a while, but it's gone well so far. Oh, well, that wasn't particularly exciting at the end. That was a chance. We need that second goal just to give us a bit of breathing space, a bit of comfort, What happened to the ball there? Did it just fly into the air? Milton Raphael, that's a cool name. Name the goalkeeper I was looking at. The corner, bottom right corner it was. Here's a chance for Ho. Go on, Ho. Oh, yes. Absolute smasher of a goal. What a cracker. And there we go. That's what we needed. That 2-goal lead. I was just ready to belt it in the bottom corner. Bada bing, bada boom. 2-0 to Burton Albion. Off the outside of his foot to the back of the net. And he celebrates as we near halftime. But yeah, I definitely do find that, with this 250-year cycle, there is evidence that the next sort of crisis peak will be in the mid-2020s. And it was interesting because this video that Vsauce released, I think it was like 2013, 2012, 2014. It was a few years ago anyway, and a good few years ago. And it was, what was interesting about it was, like, he was saying, like, oh, what will this crisis manifest in? Like, what would it be, and so on. And this is, of course, before the rise of political polarization and chaos that we've seen more or less since 2016, 2015, 2016. You could say 2015 as well, potentially. But certainly the world has changed fundamentally in a socio-political sense since the middle of this decade. So 2-0 up at halftime. But yeah, so short term, I predict, and this will be featured obviously in Future History 9, and I already kind of have featured in some of the previous Future Histories, where we will see a sort of peak of crisis around the middle of the next decade, the mid-2020s. And in the late 2020s, hopefully will be a sort of a period of perhaps begin to see sort of things cooling down after the chaos that came in the prior part of the decade. And then the 2030s might be a time of relative moderation, but it will be fundamentally different. I don't think we're going to go back to a system or a world that we had before what the situation currently is. We're not going to go backwards. I think we're going to go forwards to a new form of moderation. But again, new is the important part of that. Good defending in the end. And I think that's what we can kind of expect to happen, I believe. Symes on the ball. Phillips. No, not there then, so. So I forgot I'm meant to be talking. So future of democracy. So moving kind of beyond the short term future. Of course, not enough time in this video to go into it too much detail, but kind of go more into it in future history effectively. Long term future democracy. I think there definitely is the possibility that at some point in the future, we could see direct democracy. Of course, after things perhaps cool down in the 2030s, you might see different sort of crises emerge over the years. There's the goal, 3-0. It's a crisis for York City at the moment, especially for the goalkeeper and defence. Symes adds a third goal, 3-0 to Burton Albion. Now, it's going well today. This is much more like it. And this could possibly send us back top of the league, depending on how poor Fail do. It definitely puts us in a good position, in a great position at the moment. Nice goal. So, but yeah, direct democracy might emerge at some point in the future in a real sense. And I think I've talked about this a bit in Future History, where the idea that, like, the problem I think with, for example, this be kind of part of the direct democracy is the idea of e-voting. Now, electronic voting is something that has a lot of problems attached to it in regards to election fraud, but I think there could be a way to solve it. And my solution is, 1 second, here's a chance. No. My proposed solution is that what we could do is, so I'm like substitution. What we could do is have, so everyone is given a voter sort of ID number, but it's like a personal ID number. It's not necessarily something that, like, separating the sort of regular voter ID or identification of some kind. You'd be talking about just another sort of voting code or number that that everyone is given. It would be a private number. You could share it if you wanted to, but you wouldn't have to. And even if people knew what it was, it probably wouldn't have any sort of serious concerns or impact. But basically, what you could do then is your voter ID, basically, or this voting code that I'm talking about, would be used so that when you put your vote through, all the voting, when the vote comes through and it's released and the information is put out there and it says, this is how this country, whatever, has voted in this election or referendum or whatever it is, and this is the results in terms of the percentage, in terms of the number of people who voted which way and what way. Then what you would have then is the actual data of how each individual voter voted will be released, but it would not give their names. It would give their voting number, and remember, like, the idea would be that this voting number will be generated as a new number for each election. And if you had concerns, you could probably change it just before the vote, and then your vote would be attached to that number instead. So basically all the data will be released, and then third-party groups of various kinds could analyse the data and make sure that the data that's been shown to be released here, with all the individual votes attached to a number which would be attached to it, that individual voters would only know who that person actually is themselves, unless someone found it out, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then here comes substitution time. Oh no, we already made our changes, did we? Okay. You see some frost coming off the breath there of the goalkeeper. It's the 26th of December 2015 in this video. We call that St. Stephen's Day here, Boxing Day in the UK. I don't know much about St. Stephen, if I'm quite honest, unfortunately, but back to the point. Basically, then all these third-party groups could analyze the data and make sure that, yes, it adds up to the results that I'm claimed to have. Now, the next sort of way of checking it, that was a good chance, is quite simply, what you'd have is that was a close chance. That should have been a goal. The individuals who've made the vote could actually just look up their own vote and confirm that, yes, my vote as appears on this data matches the vote that they're claimed to have. And this data could be recorded and saved by third-party groups so that you make sure the search engine isn't being tweaked with. So you could search it through a third-party group. You could have an app that searches it through various third-party groups who have downloaded all the data, and they could be from the left, from the right, from the center. They could be non-partisan, and so that way, if you and then you have some sort of app that just checks it off for you. You could have multiple apps if you want to be absolutely sure that the app itself isn't being tampered with, and basically you could make sure. Let's try to get a fourth goal. Basically, you could make absolutely sure that, yes, it's all fine. This is my vote. This is how it's gone. And if there was any issues, well, then you could raise it, and it would be easy to spot electoral fraud in that case. presumably. And then regards to concerns that, oh, what if someone found out my voting number? Well, first of all, you could regenerate a new one. But even if you still thought that someone might see it, well, I mean, how is that any different than someone looking over your shoulder in the voting booth and just seeing what you voted for? That risk exists already in the real world, and just because it's in the digital world, then the bias shouldn't come into play to say, well, okay, all of a sudden it's a problem. So yeah, basically, that's how I look at it. So I think that's a potential solution. So yeah, that could be the future of democracy potentially. I don't think we're going to get a fork goal, unfortunately. No, we're not. But look, we did well. We won by 3 goals to 0. Great win for us, and hopefully there are great wins for democracy in the years to come. Because at the moment, and for political sanity and calmness, the world needs to obtain some sort of calmness, and perhaps by 2027 or thereabouts, the world will be starting to calm down, and everyone will be starting to put their feet up and relaxing. you know, maybe that's a bit too optimistic, but we'll see what happens. All right, so we won by 3 goals to 0 here today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.